Good evening and welcome to the Franchise Tag Podcast with me, your host, Freddie Hall. We are on the Thursday night football preview show along with me and our resident Philadelphia Eagle fan, Gareth Smith, as well. Gareth, fantastic first weekend of football we've had. We also had an awesome Thursday night game to begin the season with the Chiefs and the Ravens. I was literally going to say Packers and Eagles, but that was a Friday night game. It's just so much football has happened in such a short space of time, hasn't it?
Oh no, it's been brilliant to have it back. I think as I was like all of us, we've all kind of like missed football this off season. It's finally good to get week one in the books. Obviously, always nice when your team wins, Fred, as you all know as well. Always feels so much nicer when you get that initial win on the books.
Yes, definitely. It definitely feels as a Steeler fan waking up on a Monday morning feeling quite chipper with myself. So yeah, hopefully more of them throughout the season. But we're going to look at today at the game preview for the Thursday night football game, which we'll be doing weekly, hopefully. And this week it is the Buffalo Bills traveling to the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins who beat the Jacksonville Jaguars at home 20-17, a last-second field goal to win that game. And then we had the Buffalo Bills beating the Arizona Cardinals 34-28. 40 would have been a better score. 43-28 against the Cardinals would have been a pretty big feat of win. So yeah, both teams had both got a win in the column, Gareth, to begin the season. The Bills and the Jets are both teams that we think have got potential to be making the playoffs this year. Both have sort of got potential to go and win that AFC East as well. Obviously, the Jets are also sort of in that. Well, they might not be in the conversation anymore, but they were certainly in the conversation. But who impressed you more out of the Bills or the Dolphins to begin the season?
It's an awkward one because I think if you watch the first half of both games, I don't think you'd have picked either because both teams' first half looked very, very lackluster. I think that the second half, both teams looked very more like themselves. I think that the comeback was a bit more impressive to come back and beat the Jags, who I think are a very, very good side this year, as opposed to beating the Cardinals, that I don't think many people think are going to be that good of a side. So I'm particularly bearing in mind all the turmoil Miami had before kickoff as well, with not one, but two of them, or was even three of their players were in handcuffs before the game even started. So that's going to affect your whole pre-game. So I think I was more impressed with them mainly due to how they came back. Whereas I think that you always expected, no matter how far ahead the Cardinals got, I think you always thought, okay, Josh Allen will just turn it on now and this game will turn. So I think that it was very much the Dolphins for me I was more impressed by.
Yeah, it was such a bizarre turn of events, wasn't it? That obviously all came out over the last few days, and it's just wild. And it's just not really what we want to see or hear about, but it's relevant to hear and see about at the same time. For the Bills, for me, we sort of covered it in some of the shows over the last few days with the Bills and Cardinals. For me, I just we talk about Super Bowl winners. It just feels like this Bills one is closing so much and so quickly. They just do not feel like they have that explosiveness and that dynamic offense that they did in the last few seasons. I think it's a different offense. I think it's the offense is different in some good ways, some positive ways, and some negative ways at the same time. And then the Miami game, I have to admit, I didn't watch a load of the Miami game. So I can only comment on sort of what the scoreline was and the stat line and the box score. But if they played anything like they did last year, I can imagine it was an incredibly explosive offense and a little bit shaky defense. Was that what sort of came across?
There was a bit of that, but to be fair, the offense didn't look that great at points in the game. And then they'll just have this big play. It would just blow it wide open again. And don't get me wrong, it was the players you expected, whether it be one of the running backs, whether it be the Cheetah, whether it be Waddle, one of them would break out and instantly that whole game, you'd end up seeing them like with third and long, and then suddenly they'd be halfway up the other end of the field. So they are that side that you never feel 100% safe. Well, unless you're playing them in the north in winter, but you never feel 100% safe third and long due to the fact that they have these guys who are just absolute speed merchants. So it was interesting to see. I did watch the game, and I thought the Jags looked really good first half, and then just kind of seemed to hit a brick wall and not be able to get past that. The Dolphins defense actually played relatively well in the second half as well, but I think that the Jags should have. It felt like a game that was more of the Jags missed an opportunity to win than Miami, in effect, were the deserving winners because I thought the Jags were the better side majority of that game. But just those big explosive plays at that right moment just swung the game in the Dolphins' favour. And as you know yourself, this game can swing so quickly. Momentum is so important, and they just had that momentum as the game went on. But the Bills game was an interesting one. You say you watched the Bills game?
I watched a good portion of it. Yeah.
What was your takeaway from that game?
I think that part of it is Arizona as well. I think Arizona they do everything. They're doing the same thing that they've sort of done for a while now. They run pretty well. They can be a bit patchy on the throwing, and then their defense isn't all that great. But what impressed me about the Bills in that game was the level of control that they had, and the running game. I mean, I've got this down here. I've got in my notes here. I mean, for the Bills now, it's all about run. It is all about run for them. It is a double-headed monster in James Cook and Josh Allen. Thankfully, James Cook is now the leading provider of that rushing offense rather than Josh Allen. That's going to preserve Josh Allen. But it's not the day of, Stephon Diggs and sort of the ball going over the top a lot more. It's now gone back to the basic of just running the ball really well and taking them offensive and taking them passing plays when you can and being effective on them. I think Keon Coleman's a very good draft story that's going to probably do really well with the Buffalo Bills. I don't think he doesn't feel like a true number one, but I think he can still be a good number one for this team. And of course, they've got that dual-headed threat in Knox and Kincaid in the tight end position as well. But the run game's now got to be their bread and butter. It has got to be their bread and butter. I mean, the Dolphins defense allowed 128 rushing yards to Tank Bigsby and Travis Etienne, and they both had 12 carries. Now, they allowed 128 rushing yards to them. This double-headed monster of rushing is a lot better than them two. Don't you agree? Do you reckon this could be more hitting a bit higher?
Yeah, no, when you look at it, particularly bearing in mind, obviously, there was Tank Bigsby, who was the lead back, in effect, stats-wise, that game. And bearing in mind as well, in that game, there was basically a turnover by Etienne so close to the goal line as well again. And that was a massive momentum swing. So, whereas if you've got Cook back there, Cook is a very different animal. He is a hell of a runner. And as you mentioned, preserving Josh Allen's got to be something they've got to do because he is a game winner on his own. And you saw was it the 2 touchdown runs he did in that game, Josh Allen, and the fact that they were allowing the Jags, who don't have, probably say, the best offensive line in the division, and not the best running back room to be able to run for so many yards, it makes you wonder what the Bills can run at. And obviously being good with a run then does free up Josh Allen to get away, to be able to make those play action kind of passes that not what you normally expect with a Josh Allen offense, but having a good solid run offense enables you to be able to do some of these little trickery stuff that you don't necessarily associate with him. You expect him more big arm down the field, and as well as being able to run down the field himself. So it'll be interesting to see that dynamic and how he, in effect, evolves in this game. Is not having, and it'd be interesting as well to see Cook lead and be the headline maker over there in Buffalo.
I mean, the brass tacks of it is that any team that's got Josh Allen under center in with a chance of winning. That's why I think this game's really hard to split, to be honest with you. This has been one of the hardest games I think to split so far, because I think Josh Allen, I'm very vocal in the fact that I really do like him a lot. So they've always got a chance. I think, if they stay committed to that running game and give Miami some real problems, they could really come out with a win here. Miami, but their defense it isn't what it was. They allowed for 270 offensive yards, and that's against an offense that I don't think is all that. So, I mean, that could easily be 350, 400 total offensive yards if Miami sort of pour on the water, because this Miami offense it's so dynamic, like you just said, like with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. They've got, I know they've got injuries at the running back room though. Isn't Raheem Mostert and Devon A-Chain both injured for this game? It was
they're both game day decisions. They're both game day decisions. It said earlier, so they're going to be game day decisions, both of them. Which is bearing in mind how good of a game A-Chain had as well. He was brilliant in that game. So if they lose him, I think it'd be I would swing one side straight away if he was out. I would think that the Bills would win. So him being potentially out is massive. And because Waddle wasn't injury free that game either, he came out and came back in.
Yeah.
So it's early injury issues potentially.
How impressive have you been by that Miami running back room though? Because they seem to do well every year. Like 3 or 4 of them seem to do well every year, and I don't think any of them are top 10. None of them are top 10 running backs. Maybe not even top 15 running backs, and that's maybe being harsh, but they seem to find a way to run the ball really well.
Yeah, I think it's because it's a team that's very creative with how they play call. Like they love motion, they love lots of pre-snap stuff. I think that obviously then always can potentially lead to confusion with defenses, and that obviously really helps them. And you got running backs that okay, as you say, may not be. I actually really rate AFC. I actually think he's a good, solid top 10 back myself. Mostert, on the other hand, obviously isn't, but he still does quite well there. I think it's just because of a lot of creative play calling gives these players these opportunities and gets them into good positions on the field. And a lot of them, as you say, motion can confuse defenses, particularly if your defense isn't scheduled or set up for it. You also wonder whether there's a little bit of the fact that they are playing, obviously, in the heat of Miami wears down these big, heavier units that are defensive guys, whether that's another reason why maybe the running backs seem to do so well in South Florida, because of the fact that the weather there, big, heavy guys don't always do very well in very, very warm weather. So you do wonder whether that is another impact as why running backs potentially, particularly as the games go on, have these bigger and bigger impacts in Miami. It is an interesting one to see that how they manage to keep churning. And I think a lot of that has to go down to the head coach, McDaniels, who was very creative. I think he's a really good head coach myself. I don't know what your thoughts are about him as a head coach.
I think he's fantastic. He's a very, very interesting head coach. Very funny, obviously. I think he's incredibly creative, and I think he all coaches believe in their players. But like I was going to sort of ask you about, we talked about Josh Allen quarterback, but let's talk about Tua. There was so much rumbling about maybe they were going to take quarterback and stuff in the draft, and I just never thought it would happen because I felt like every time McDaniel speaks at the podium, he seems like Tua is his guy. Like he's got every belief in him, and I can imagine having someone like him. I mean, Tua sort of said it, hasn't he, about with Brian Flores and like about how they would behave with him and how McDaniels behaves with him, and it's so player empowerment. It's so positive. It's so joyous. So I think players love that. Like players really, really love that, and it's surprising that they didn't retain players. Like obviously they had total cap issues, but I can imagine Christian Wilkins would have probably wanted to stay there if he could, because I feel like it is a good atmosphere and they've got like a real thing going on there. But yeah, with Tua, how do you feel about Tua? Because it's very diverse. It's very sort of, no one sort of sits in the middle on this subject, do they? They either really don't like him or they really like him. I always feel.
And this is where I'm going to be the guy who sits on the fence, because I consider him a mid quarterback. I don't consider him top end. I don't consider him Daniel Jones or anyone that kind of level. I consider him a mid-range quarterback who can get the job done. He is obviously also blessed with an absolute plethora of talent around him that no matter how big of an arm you've got, you're not going to overthrow Tyreek Hill, are you? Like he's just that fast, and Waddle's also very good. I quite like that offense as a whole. So I think that a lot of good play calling helps him as well. Having good running back play helps him because it takes that pressure off himself. And so I do think he's a mid-range quarterback myself. Obviously he got paid a substantial amount of money, but I think there's not a QB in the league who doesn't get paid a substantial amount of money when contract negotiation comes in. But I don't think it was as break the bank as some of these other quarterbacks that have. I think he has his issues. Obviously, his injury history is not great, and you don't want a franchise quarterback who has had the level of injuries that he has had, and you always worry about him when he does get hit. But as I say, he's a quarterback that I don't think you necessarily need to rely on to win games in Miami because of how they draw up the plays and the run game and some of the other weapons around him. I just think he is a piece in that offense, whereas Josh Allen is traditionally the offense. And I think that's the fundamental difference between the two of them.
That's a really interesting way to put it. That he's a piece in the offense, and Josh Allen is. That's such a good analogy, actually, of the difference is between these two teams. I was actually at this fixture 2 years ago. Funnily enough, weirdly,
I remember tables. I remember table videos. I remember you sending us table videos.
It was the butt punt game where the punt went into the player's bum. It was when it was like 38 degrees and people were like the Bills players were like passing out on the sideline. It was wild. So let's get at it. Who's going to win this game, Gareth? For you, it's going to be. And do you think that ultimately one of these two teams will win the AFC East?
Yeah, I originally at the beginning of the season, like an absolute fool, picked the Jets to win, and after week 1, I'm already jumping off that hype train. I've jumped off that hype train after week 1, so I'm very, very fickle. But Eagles fans, we are quite fickle about stuff. So to be fair, I think that the winner is going to come from one of these two. I think the winner of this game will heavily depend on whether the running back room is fit and healthy. So Miami, I think if the running back room is fit and healthy, Miami win. If it doesn't, I'm going Bills. And that's a problem to have when I can't make when we don't know the injury status till the morning of. But I think that if the running backs are there and fit and healthy, Miami win a close game. If they're not, then I think Buffalo wins healthily. That's the difference between this, I think. I feel like I'm sitting on the fence a lot. I've literally sat on the fence with Tua being mid. I'm now sat on the fence with, well, it depends who's playing. But what about yourself? Where are you going with this one? Because I'm very curious to see what are your thoughts.
We've said this a lot over the weekend about the cobwebs being blown off by some of these teams, and also momentum and getting rolling. We said that about the Jets defense. If there was some momentum, there'd be a different game that game the other night. And like you put this game in week 8, totally different game, I think. But you put this game in week 2, Thursday night, yeah, it'll be at night, but it is still warm in Miami. Like it's not going to be as hot as it is on a Sunday game. Yeah. But I think it's going to be difficult for the Bills to go there and get our win. I think this Dolphins team has got a lot over the top. I just don't think the Bills are that dynamic in their offense anymore, and I don't trust their defense all that much. Again, I don't overly trust the Dolphins defense more that much, but they're at home. They've got a bit more of a dynamic offense. I feel like they've sort of got going a bit quicker than the Bills, maybe. They narrowly beat the Jags, and the Jags are a decent team. The Bills narrowly beat the Cardinals, and I don't think the Cardinals are a good team. So that's sort of where I'm swaying with that. So it wouldn't shock me if Bills come out with a win. I wouldn't, but I'm going to go for the Dolphins for this game. I just think it's early in the season, which favors Miami. I think if it goes further on, the Bills could have found a bit more momentum by that point.
I think as well, you often find these teams have a tendency to like to split. Like the one team wins in the sunny bit, the other one wins in the freezing cold. Like it's just how these two teams seem to do it out. It's what happens when you have two teams that play in such contrasting climates. I do, as you mentioned, it being an evening game, obviously it will be a little bit cooler, and so maybe that does help Buffalo out. But as I say, I think the problem that the Dolphins will have is if they are without one or both of those running backs, I think that's where the game changes, because they need that good running back play to enable Tua to then be a bit more free. If it's relying solely on Tua's shoulders to win the game, it's not going to go their way. If you're going to put money on either those two quarterbacks to win you a game, I know where I think 95% of people's money would go. And those 5% are Dolphins fans who wouldn't go that way. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see if obviously is Jalen Ramsey back for this or not.
Unsure for that one, to be honest with you.
Because again, he could be, because him potentially being back as well could be a factor as well. Because at the end of the day, he's not a bad player to be able to deploy. I know the Jags aren't particularly fans of him due to how he left there originally, but him being back again could make, because as you mentioned, their wide receiver room isn't as high powered these days, the Bills. So having someone back there, and Josh Allen is partial to an occasional pick as well. He's very much, I'm going to get you shed loads of TDs, but yeah, I'm also going to get quite a few interceptions. So having someone like back there, like Jalen Ramsey, I think as well, could be quite crucial for the Dolphins. But the problem is they are very injury laden already in regards to some key pieces, and I think that's a slight concern. But if they are playing and they are back, that's Dolphins.
Well, it sounds like you've got off the fence and you lean towards the Dolphins, I think. So that's okay. Anyway, thank you guys for watching the Thursday Night Football Preview Show. They're becoming weekly. Don't turn the channel though, because basically pretty much after we come off is going to be our fantastic college show with Andrew and Alex. We have weekly. And also, we'll have tons more content coming out the rest of the week with our betting show and more to come very soon. Make sure you follow us on YouTube and on our social media. Until then, we'll see you all again very soon and enjoy the game on Thursday night.